This episode of Let's Talk Mate is brought to you by Novatech. Thank you to Novatech for sponsoring the show and helping to support men's mental health. Hello everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk Mate, Solent Mind's men's mental health chat. And before we get into this episode, I'd like to quickly remind you that if there's anything at all that affects you that we talk about in this episode, please go ahead and go to our support line. Or if you live in Portsmouth, you can go to the harbour and the surrounding areas of Portsmouth, Fareham, Havant East, Hampshire and Gosport, I believe. Or if you're in Southampton, head over to the Lighthouse and they'll be able to help you out. If not, as I said, the support line will be able to let you know absolutely anywhere that is accessible in your area. And this episode, we will be talking about social media. So we'll be going over, let's talk about pros of social media, how it has kind of affected a lot of our other episodes and stuff like that, as well as, just the general building a healthy relationship with social media. So first of all, I'd just like to introduce myself. I am Sam. I'm the digital content officer for Solent Mind. And just introduce my guests. Let's start with you, Rob.
Hi, good afternoon. My name's Rob. I'm the Community Peer Recovery Team Lead in Portsmouth Services.
Thank you very much, and welcome back again, Rob, of course.
Thank you.
Mike, can you introduce yourself and new guests with us today?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I'm Mike, so I'm here to talk a little bit about the mental health blogging, the online side, but also during the day I work at another local mind as well, so I can feed into some of those conversations.
Yeah, that's perfect. So I think Rob, this is you can attest this has kind of been a long time coming, this episode, because social media has come up so many of our previous conversations, and it kind of is integral to when we're talking about mental health now. Social media almost always comes into it in some way, shape or form, whether it's for positive or negative reasons, there's both sides of the coin. So what has kind of been, what's your experience in terms of talking to service users, especially, and how often does social media come up in those kind of conversations?
It does come up an awful lot. I think there's no escaping social media, let's face it. We're in 2022. It's a part of everyday life. I think the service users that I've supported, their kind of take on that will maybe kind of depend on a generational thing, which you'll probably hear this from me a couple of times in today's episode. I being kind of someone who's nearly 40 now, I remember when social media in its infancy. So some of our younger service users, again, they'll tend to talk that they might be more able to see the positive side. They've grown up with it, whereas some of our older service users, they might kind of find it really difficult to get on with, or it might depending on people's age groups, it might not play a significant factor in their life. But I think I've had a lot of discussions with it. Again, both pros and cons, and also just not just with my service users, but with people in my personal life who I know have kind of struggled, with their mental health. We've had some very kind of frank discussions around, the benefits of it. I know there's some amazing kind of resources out there for people via social media to help in their recovery journey. But also, again, I guess, I know sometimes the negative things and about kind of how we can maintain a healthy relationship with it as well. So, but it's definitely it's a factor of everyone's, pretty much, well, not everyone's, but most of our daily lives. It's a factor. Trying to find someone who doesn't have at least one social media account today is quite rare. So.
And Mike, that's something you would reflect from your experiences as well. And obviously, you might see a lot more of the positive side of things in the work you do, but I can imagine you do also get a lot of people, and especially like me, you can talk about this in terms of people that work in social media or have a big part of their life is in social media. That can almost be its own thing in general, is trying to find the balance there, especially like me, it being my day job. It's a tough balance to find.
It's so tricky, and I think you both touched on very different kind of parts of social media. Is there? I always think of, for a long time, I spoke about social media in terms of it being a tool. Like it's good or bad. It's just a tool, and it's how we use it. And I always used to talk about like, oh, it's the same as just like a spanner or a ruler. Like you can use it for its purpose and it's really good, but you can also misuse it and do things with it that it's not meant for and kind of cause harm. And then I watched there was like a Netflix documentary, I think a couple of years ago, and really went into kind of how algorithms work and how people are targeted and sent down different avenues. I think that's a slightly different way that social media can work, is that, you know, when I put the ruler down, that's it. It's not thinking about a way to make me pick it back up again. It's just going to sit there in the drawer until I decide to do that. So social media is a bit more than a tool. And but I'm very aware of that's kind of how I would originally talk about it. And that's still how I kind of think about it. But it's being aware that it is doing something on its own as well. In terms of mental health, I think it plays a huge role in supporting people. It's still very much a topic that there's a lot of stigma around, whether it's a mental health illness or it's someone struggling with certain symptoms or a life situation. That opportunity to kind of reach out in a slightly more anonymous way, slightly more private, I think feels a huge role and a real kind of support network for people. And I know kind of when I started sharing my story for the first time, a big part of that was not necessarily talking to one person individually. It was just sharing it on a platform where it could be read and you kind of felt like you were talking to people without the pressure of being face to face. So it can feel a really important role for people, but it's looking at the structure that sits there. So particularly when we're talking about services, like how do we engage and support those people? How do we encourage signposting? So people are aware of support either kind of online or locally. There's lots of different ways you can kind of feed into that. So yeah, I think that the real positives, I don't like saying there are negatives, I guess there are dangers, but yeah, some real positives and some things to watch out for.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think it is exactly, it is very much how you use it. I think sometimes, well, like social media feels like it's used as a bit of a scapegoat. It's an easy kind of excuse to throw out things. I know we kind of talk about, and this isn't directly related to mental health, but it will affect people's mental health. And when the whole conversations come around football and the racism that comes out of football on social media, people are very quick to go, oh, it's because social media is this, social media is that. But what people got to realize is there's still a human behind those social media accounts. Like it's not a bot on social media that's been racist a lot of the time. I mean, I'm sure there's examples of bots being all sorts, but there's not often in this case. And I think there is a danger to almost completely scapegoating social media, because then that leads you to not focus on where there is other issues, because it becomes just too easy to go, especially when you talk about, I don't know, we looked at body image was one of the huge things, and social media played a huge part in the body image episode. It'd be very easy to just pinpoint and go, oh, this is a huge issue because of social media. But it's been an issue for a lot longer than social media has been around as well. It'd be too easy just to blame it all on one thing. And how do these kind of things, are they affected? But also how do we need to be careful about not putting all the blame on social media and then ignoring the other things?
I think part of that, just to follow on very quickly, is that side of I think you mentioned like social media is very much used as a modern quick example, quick excuse, quick reason why. Like body image definitely like hugely affected by social media, but it's not like we didn't have magazines and newspapers that used certain images in the past that kind of put forward negatives and positives about certain body images or appearances. So I think that's kind of it's a misuse that's kind of represented there. But yeah, there are overlaps, but I know I can sense Rob's got something to say there as well.
Yeah, I think as you say, I mean the body image one, as quite rightly say, I remember watching that episode, and I think one of the guests was talking about how every photo you see on, so a lot of these photos, they can be like taken, rehearsed a million times, taken from different angles. It's, as you say, I mean, you can't ignore pre-2000, and I could be wrong. I'm going to say 2008 roughly, maybe, because that's when I first remember. That's just in my mind when I first remember things like Facebook really blowing up. But it's, as you say, there's always been, we've had print media for a number of years, films, TVs, and and Sam gave an example about the racism, and I think of that example after the recent kind of Euros final and everything that came out. That's always, it's not like there hasn't been racism in football going back to the 90s and before. I think what social media has kind of done, it's allowed for more of a spotlight to be kind of shone on some of these things. And I think, you can take that and say, yeah, okay, maybe there's a danger there, but also I think it's taking it as a positive in terms of actually, if it is shining a spotlight on this thing, mate, we're more aware that there are, for anyone who might say, oh, you don't have, you don't have issues with racism in this country, actually that shone a spotlight on it. And that says, well, so yeah, here's positive proof via social media that we still have an issue with this in this country. And I think it's, what it's doing is, yeah, it's for better or worse. I think for better, it's allowing more of a spotlight on these things. And it does also kind of start that conversation a lot of the time. The amount of positive posts I've seen on social media regards body image and, and encouraging people to, think again and encouraging more kind of healthy discussions around that, So yeah, I think it is very definitely. And I think maybe again, there's a generational thing, maybe for someone for people a bit older, maybe it's easier to fall into that kind of scapegoating of social media sometimes, so I think it's important to have that, like everything, you've got to have that balanced conversation and try and have that objective view on it.
And I think if we to latch onto body image thing, because as you were talking, that kind of something popped up. You do, especially, and I think this is maybe a different between men's and women's mental health, going on men's mental health podcast, of course, but the positive body image movement does feel a little bit more strongly women doing it a lot of the time. Women are a lot more, and I know, and then my kind of thought is for every airbrushed, perfected photo, you get the person who's doing that. And one of my favorite types of social media posts at the moment is the people posting from like the worst angles and showing like what happens to someone's body, when like, I know there's a fair through models on Instagram who will post their like perfectly posed picture and then they'll slouch over a little bit and show what it actually kind of looks like and stuff like that. And I think those kind of things are hugely positive, but I don't, and maybe one of you can correct me if you're wrong, if you have seen it, I haven't seen a lot of that when it comes to men's body image. I see it a lot more with women and this positive body movement, but not as much with men's. And is that maybe just a case of men aren't quite as ready to show their flaws yet? I don't know. I'm trying to figure out where, I don't even know, maybe I'm completely making this up, but it kind of, as you're talking, I kind of had that thought and realized I didn't see much of it with men.
I mean, I think I see some of it, but then I have so much kind of mental health pages, things like that I follow. So my kind of social media newsfeed might be quite different than your average man's because of my, because of my work and my interests. But yeah, I think it's like everything. There's so many, not everything, there's a lot of areas where men have been a bit slower to kind of get on board with these open and frank conversations. I think hence why we started the podcast in the first place. I'm maybe not the best person to judge on that. So I'm probably not on, I don't get on with social media as much as I used to. I don't know, Mike, how about, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Just gonna come in.
It's nice to not always reply first. I think it's like I think I talked first last time. Yeah, I think a little bit the same as you, Rob, to be honest. I think I'm very aware of when I feel like I see social changes, I'm seeing them within the circles that I'm in, and like both of you, kind of very engaged in mental health conversations, both in person and online. And so the circle of kind of the network around me is, I would say, predominantly more informed, more pro talking about things that we're experiencing, both struggles and successes. So when I see those changes, I do also keep in mind it is a selective group. Like these are people around me that are all kind of thinking a similar sort of thing, and that's why we're following each other or online friends or whatever. So I do keep that in mind, that when we talk about, there is public change, there are more people speaking. Like how are you deciding that's happening? Like, is it from your personal circle, and is that because you are someone that does speak about things? That's still great. but does that mean that that's happening within the wider population? I think it is, but I also think you'll probably find it's happening a lot more in those smaller community circles than kind of the wider population. As Sam mentioned, like I've seen and I'm aware that there are males online sharing lots of information about personal stories with body image and body change, and that's great. For me personally, it's definitely not at the same level as I see that within kind of female focused posts, but there are some there. And so I wonder if that was something that you were kind of really engaged in or looking for. I imagine there are quite a lot of individuals that are sharing those stories online, but you probably have to sort of seek them out a little bit more than just kind of going on to Twitter or wherever you're going to go and just logging in. You're not just going to see that. You've probably got to search for it still, I think.
Yeah. I think I'm quite, I don't know if this is lucky, but it gives me a bit more of an outside view. Like my Twitter is very much in those circles where it's a lot of people I've met through work, or it's a lot of people for various works, through various things that I do. Whereas then my Instagram is still a lot of the people that I've met in real life. I don't say in real life, I don't like that phrasing, because social media is still very much real life, but there's not a lot of other offline, is maybe the best way of phrasing that. But so I don't see an awful lot of it on my Instagram versus on my Twitter, because of the circles that I tend to find myself in on either one. So I do see a little bit of a thing, but again, I think a lot of people, if you follow me, you know what my mindset is on it, because I don't shut up. So a lot of people that maybe have, I don't even say negative views, but less views that might not even just want to think about that, because I know and understandably so, there's a lot of people like that, maybe wouldn't want to follow me after following me for a little bit, so then I lose that kind of connection. But it is interesting kind of think about, you know, we're all working mental health, so we all have a, you know, we have the best version of, we see the best version almost. So it will be interesting to hear. And obviously if people are listening to this, again, if you're listening to this, you probably aren't from the group outside, but if you are, then please do let us know kind of what your experiences have been of anything that we talk about, because we're always really curious to hear. And again, as people that are more involved in the mental health field, it'd be really interesting to hear people that are less involved and maybe, you know, just follow Solent Mind because, you know, they've either used one of our services or they're just aware of the local charity. So yeah, I think everything we've been talking about so far has kind of been leading back to this idea of like, yes, there's good and bads, but we need to build a healthy relationship with social media. That is quite a key part of, you know, growing up now. You do have to learn how to build a healthy relationship with social media, which is something that wasn't a thing in the past. How have both of you found your kind of mix? Like Mike, you specifically, because again, you know, you do a lot of work in social media and that's outside of your already working days. So how has it been for you, like finding that balance and finding that in between?
I think it's really tricky that I say not just the social media side, but if you're someone that works within kind of a care setting and also requires or needs the support, sometimes that can be a really tricky thing to balance off. And I think from my experience, a lot of the people that I interact with around kind of mental health services or campaigns or projects, they're really involved and they're really passionate because they themselves or someone really close to them has had some sort of lived experience with a mental health illness or certain symptoms. And so that can be really tricky to balance that, because that lived experience really helps inform things and really is to the benefit of services. But it also means there are extra things that that person might struggle with in terms of kind of managing their time and the things that they're taking on board. And I remember kind of before I started in my role at a local mind, I was working in a local college, and I had someone I knew, a friend, worked at another local mind kind of a little bit more north from where we are in Hampshire. And talking to them, and they were like, oh, you need to be really mindful of kind of, you're going to be working in the day on kind of mental health related stuff, and then in the evening when you're kind of doing blog or podcast stuff or whatever else, you're going to be spending more time on mental health, and it's also something you've got experience with. Like that's a lot of time on one area that's quite focused. And that conversation kind of really stuck with me in terms of being mindful of how I spend my time and the need to kind of have breaks and other things that like you have interests or passions that are away from this space. So I think that's really important if you're someone that's a volunteer, a practitioner, someone supporting a campaign or anything like that, to have something that is away from this space so it doesn't become everything. And also just as like a well-being tool to kind of de-stress or decompress sometimes is really important. So it's not just the social media side of kind of constantly being on the go or feeling like you've always got to respond to something. I think for us in this kind of mental health space, there's that focus as well is a really important one.
Obviously, Rob, you kind of mentioned you're using social media less now than you maybe used to. Is that something that has been very much intentional because of how it was making you feel, or is that just something that's just slowly happened over time?
I think part of it might be just I'm struggling to keep up with my age. I tried to do a Facebook post the other week, and somehow I managed to put it on Instagram at the same time, and I still have no idea how I did that. So maybe no. I think what I noticed. So I had a long when Facebook first came along, I was studying at uni at the time. I'd gone to university a bit later in life, and it was great, for that old thing of procrastinating when you were a student. I'm sure any of us many people would kind of relate to that. And I think for me, funny enough, I've had less use for it as I've progressed in my recovery. As I'm busier, so I spent a long time out of work, and as I've gone back to full-time work, I found I have less time to just be kind of scrolling about. But I think it's kind of, and this is maybe where the benefits of it do come in, because I used to use social media quite a lot to just kind of vent. If I was having a bad patch and I was really kind of struggling, and I didn't feel I could make that step of calling a friend or family member, or calling services that I was under, I would just kind of put it out there on Facebook, and it was amazing, and it felt so freeing. And I think the only thing I would say to that, to anyone listening, if you do that, obviously do be prepared that people might, if they see that, they will then be checking in on you, and they'll be asking you if there's things they can do. So I found actually, looking back, taking that step back, I think it's kind of, as I've got better, I've needed it less. And and again, partly, as I say, partly the age thing, not being so with it. I know Facebook isn't quite as much the thing these days. It's more Instagram and other platforms. So I think that would probably be for me. I've not needed it. It's performed a very kind of useful purpose in my life, and I don't necessarily need it as much now.
Yeah, I think
sorry, Sam, go on.
Yeah, no, I was just say I kind of very similar to kind of how I feel about social media. Is like there was a time in my life where I felt like I would say I'd use it as a bit of a crutch, and like it almost at a certain point it helped me, and then it got to a certain point where I had it too much. I was almost using social media instead of going to therapy, which is what I probably needed more at the time. And I think it almost, so I think I definitely got to that point maybe when I was around 19, 20-ish, where I was like, okay, I need it. And I didn't really know at the time until, like I just say, until you do get better and you go, oh, okay, you look back and you realize. But yeah, definitely when I was kind of 13, 14, 15, it was so beneficial for me because I felt extremely lonely in the place that I grew up. And I grew up back in Southeast London. And as an LGBT person back in Southeast London, there's not a huge amount of people around that are like you, or at least that you can see that are like you. So having social media allowed me to meet, talk to a lot more people like me and see a lot more people like me in every regard. And even like in terms of the early stages of realizing that I had mental health issues versus just being sad. like I think when you're a teenager and people are so bad for just being like, oh, you're just teenager, just hormones, just this, it's just that. And it wasn't until I looked at social media and started reading some of the symptoms that people would put up for like anxiety or depression or whatever else, I went, oh, okay, I see some like that makes sense and kind of clicks together. I think that's a really helpful tool that social media allows, because it does make you think, oh, okay, there's something more to this than just having a bad day or whatever else. But yeah, as and similarly to you, Rob, as I've gotten a little bit healthier and kind of gained control of my mental health a little bit myself, I have used social media that little bit less, and I certainly don't rely on it as much as I used to. Even down to the point of like my current partner is the first person I ever met who wasn't online, which is just like, you know, and there was a point where I was like 20, where the only friends I pretty much had were online friends. Whereas in now the last couple of years, I've still got a lot of online friends, a lot of ones that I've met in person and all that kind of thing. But I've also got a balance of people from work, uni, and just people I've stumbled across in everyday life. So I think finding that balance can be so difficult, but you need that break from it to realise it, I think.
I think is part of that, it sort of sounds like from our experience as well, is that first bit is sometimes you're finding your own kind of community and sort of forming that, and then once you've done that, sometimes those become friends and you're talking to them separately away from social media. Like I know one of the big things for me at the beginning was like there were like Twitter chats, like every week there'd be one or two, and I'd be at all of them because you get to meet other people, you'd share the things that you were struggling with, but also hear about other people's experiences, and they felt like a real kind of community space. Some of those still happen now, like not as many, but there are still some that run. I know there's a few that run daily, so they're still there. But I think because like either we move forward with our own recovery or our own journey, or we pick up other things, like those things that were supportive in the past, maybe they'd still be nice to go to, but we don't need them in the same way, because I think they're very much something I still sort of like, I recommend them to people, but they're not really things that I go to anymore, just because it's like, oh, it's often in the evenings, and it's like, oh, by the time it's got to then, like there's something else I need to do, or I actually want to not look at a screen for an hour or two. So yeah, I think it's like you say, you pick up on it's where you are in your journey. It's not necessarily the same as someone else. So looking at how it can support you can be really useful.
I think sometimes it depends what's going on in your life as well. I just had some thought about during the pandemic, probably, you know, during lockdown, my social media use probably, I think, looking back at it, probably exploded a bit more, you know, and I just think, you know, but then as well, thinking about the benefits of something like social media during, you know, the last couple of years, which has been, you know, unprecedented, you know, for all of us, let's face it. That's very kind of few people alive today who would have lived through the last kind of pandemic on that scale. If you go back, you know, given that it was 1918 or whatever the last kind of the Spanish flu was. But I'm just thinking about it, and things like our Solent Mind support line, which was started during the pandemic as a coronavirus support line. How were people finding out about that? It's probably largely again through our social media pages, and you know, that then enable people to find that support, you know. So it's definitely, and I think and again going back to kind of people, you know, people talk about, you know, scapegoat, you know, social media, and might kind of talk about the negatives or things, but actually, yeah, you know, let's have a look at it. I think the positives are far outweigh, you know, outweigh any of the negatives, really. And I know, you know, if maybe we should be using the word negative, but
yeah, and I think it's worth as well, like in terms of just, you know, I think we've really highlighted in the pandemic how much mental health services could really use social media to reach more people, and use online services to reach more people, because we were kind of forced into that a lot of the time. A lot of Solent Mind, and again, Rob can correct me if I'm wrong, because I wasn't working for Solent Mind before the pandemic, but from what I could tell, a lot of it was face-to-face, and then going into pandemic, we moved very quickly and got everything back up and running, did really well. And then we started to realize that a lot of people actually benefit more from the kind of online interaction. You think people with agoraphobia or just any form of anxiety, sometimes the idea of going to a centre can be so frightening. Even for me, like I've been looking at the ways we can make it easier for people to know what to do once they get to their wellbeing centres, because I know for me personally, I'm so frightened of the idea of going into a situation where I don't know what I'm meant to be doing. I don't know who, like, am I meant to go up to this desk, or am I meant to go and sit in the waiting area? Like, that just fills me with so much anxiety. But like the idea of that so many people benefit from the idea of they don't have to go to these services anymore. They can just sit online, even to the point of now we've got a web chat on the website. So you don't even have to call if you don't want to, because that can be very anxiety inducing for some people. You can just text in a web chat. And I think the way, as much as like we were going in that direction anyway with mental health services, the pandemic has kind of pushed us into that a little bit faster. And we have really seen the benefits to the point now where we are really going with the hybrid approach in every way, shape or form that we can. I think
definitely it's really given us that push. And I think, although, you know, for a lot of us will say, and for me personally, you know, for me, there's no replacement for face-to-face support, but let's, you know, recognize that a lot of people were struggling to access that. So again, you know, one of the benefits that has come, as you quite rightly say, yeah, we've, you know, just all the different ways that we've kind of looked at how we can reach people and how we can support people. And I think, you know, as you say, that blended approach, it really is the future in terms of offering support to people.
I think just, yeah, it makes such a huge difference. And sometimes you need, there needs to be that big push to get kind of that sort of social change to happen, to really acknowledge the online offer. But we're really fortunate in Hampshire, we've got 3 local minds. That's like an offering that is pretty strong, I think, compared to other areas in the country. So we're really fortunate to have that, but it's still reliant on someone being able to, or being comfortable to, or safe to go and access those physical locations. And maybe they live a 5-minute walk away, but that doesn't matter if, like you say, if they can't go outside, if they are worried or concerned about that. So it's not always how close you are, it's the access. I think making sure that we have those online offerings, whether that's kind of web chat over the phone, whether it's now kind of the Zoom calls or things like that, it's really reflecting on how and why are we supporting people and what are the limitations of that. The online offer is essentially free requirement, I guess, over the last 18 months or so, because we couldn't go out. But now we can. It's really judging that and going, okay, what does this role feel? What's the purpose of it? And actually, it's extremely useful. And I think something that hopefully most people will continue with, kind of, as you were mentioning, Sam, that hybrid offer of having both and maybe other things in between as we learn along the way as well.
Yeah. And I think just kind of, and I just want, because I realise that we're talking very positively about everything at the moment, but I just want to, like, I think that's fine, because there's plenty of places you can go and get the negative side of things.
Let's talk negative stuff.
Yeah. It's in abundance, isn't it? Like, we know, as I say, building that healthy relationships, not becoming reliant on it. And, you know, just, I think rather than talking about necessarily about negatives, we're finding what are some of the ways that we have found has benefited us in terms of finding that healthy balance? Because I know for me personally, I mean, I didn't really find the healthy balance as much. I love a social media break. Like, I generally, sometimes I'm not good at controlling my access when I am just fully in on it, because I just do it mindlessly at this point. But having those weekends, or even just an evening where I go, all right, delete the apps or turn off the notifications, phone down, and just do something. Like, it doesn't have to be anything in particular. It can just be like, and sometimes it's like still looking at screens, it's like playing video games or something like that. But it's just something where my mind is fully involved on that. And I think, yeah, just social media breaks. Also, just for me personally, I find it so, and as Robert's pointed out, I find it so therapeutic being open on social media. Like, I make a point, and I think it's also a point of, like, people, social media is people highlight reel for the most part. Like, it's the best bits, it's everything, it's a bit they want to show you. So it can be so easy to look at someone else's social media and go, oh my God, what an amazing life they live. Meanwhile, like while they're posting this, they're like really depressed, sat like on their sofas or whatever. And I know I've been guilty of that in the past, where people have gone, "Oh my god, like everything that must be amazing," and I'm just like, I haven't left the flat for 3 days. But now I'm kind of trying a little bit to just every now and then post going, "Oh, I'm in a really bad mood, this, that, and the other. I feel anxious because of this, that, and the other." And I think you get people either like, sometimes you get people checking in, which isn't really a lot of the time what I'm after, but then you get the people go, "Oh god, yeah, I was feeling that today," and it's nice to see that someone else was, or like, I like, because I've been dealing with mental health stuff since I was like 13 or 14, whereas a lot of people, especially again with the pandemic, have only started dealing with it in the last couple of years, or at least knowingly so. I'm able to give a little bit of advice, a little bit of feedback from stuff that I've done previously. So I think that side of things, it's taking the breaks when you need to, but also allowing yourself to be yourself on social media rather than the best version of yourself all the time, I think has always been really beneficial for me.
Yeah. I think that's one of the key things I try and remind a lot of my service users about when we have had those conversations about, they've been looking at their friends or their families kind of feed, and everything's really kind of, seems to be going swimmingly. So it's, again, to have that perspective about, in a lot of ways, social media isn't real in terms of it's not 100% accurate reflection of what's going on. I remember so just combination of physical and mental health issues over the years. My work history has been a bit spotty in my 20s. I wasn't able to get going career-wise. I didn't have money, didn't have my own place, didn't have a flat, and I was seeing people my own age at school who on social media who were, really well established in their careers, had their own homes, were having kids, getting married, and it's very easy to take that to heart. But as you say, you've got to try and remind yourself that actually, you don't know what's going on underneath the surface. As social media breaks, definitely as well, can be such a really kind of use. Yeah, every now and again, it's really good to take a break from that, especially during the pandemic. I'd be advising clients every now and again, take a bit of a break from social media, so you're not maybe exposing yourself to quite as much of the kind of the kind of really depressing and and scary news around the pandemic. I think, and just kind of going back to my own point, what I kind of found at one point is, it's going to sound quite harsh, but I unfriended a lot of people on Facebook because I realized, do I actually need to see what's going on in their lives? Do I have connections with them? Do I really, am I really kind of talking to them? I had a thing where I used to just blanketly, someone I went to school with, they sent me a friend request. I suppose I should, accept. You don't have to do that. There's nothing wrong with having a very small select group of friends on social media. That's one of the beauties of it. You can choose who you see, who you follow, who you're sharing your kind of, your feed with. So yeah, maybe kind of have a, so anyone out there, maybe kind of have a think about who you're following. Do you need to do a bit of a trim? Is it helpful? Is having 600 or 700 plus friends on social media helpful in your daily life?
Yeah. And I think that is a key point, is trying not to feel guilty, because it is your social media at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It should be your experience. Whatever you want from that experience, you should be able to craft it and not feel guilt over it. Because I go through my Twitter on maybe a monthly basis and go through my following. I'll be like, oh, do I really need to be following them anymore? And to have a little clear out, as you say, and my Facebook friends, exactly the same thing. And I realize we'll run out of time, so we just want to quickly go to Mike and just ask a little bit about, the Mental Health Blog Awards, a podcast you want, and stuff like that. So just talk about that and the benefits you found from that, and also some of the people you found from that as well, because some of the Mental Health Blog Awards winners are just an amazing set of people that really do amazing work, aren't they?
Yeah, it's really, I always feel like I'm going to miss someone off. So I was trying to avoid doing the name in the names, because like, I'm going to pick the same 3 people. But yeah, I think for me, kind of sharing my experience very much started as an online blog, probably about 8-ish years ago, I guess. And I think it really was just kind of that coping strategy at the beginning to be able to kind of share those stories. It wasn't anonymous, but it also was never kind of forwarded on to anyone. So it's like, if you found it, you found it. So it was a really kind of indirect way of starting that conversation, and kind of over time, I still use it for that, but it's kind of become less of the main purpose. It's a prompt for conversations as well. I try to be really careful now with kind of what and how I post, rather than in the past they were quite raw. This is what I'm experiencing it now, here's the post. Whereas now it's more a case of like, this is something I was experiencing a week ago, I'm fine now, and also if you are affected by any of this, here's some signposting. So there is an element of kind of, I think, I don't really like saying professionalizing it, but kind of making it a bit more suitable for more people to read if they want to. But I got to the stage where I really wanted to have more conversations, and that's where the podcast started a few years later, and kind of lent into a lot more conversations and having those both online and in person as well. And gradually, I attend a few different events and see like there's a celebration of online communities and conversations of blogs and podcasts and everything else. And mental health was very much kind of just thrown in with health. So you had kind of fitness, nutrition, body image, mental health, they were all kind of just thrown in together. And it very much felt like every so often this is getting a bit of a mention, but not really. And actually, for the most part, people that are sharing their stories and experiences online aren't doing it for awards. They just want to have that coping mechanism, or to educate people or help inform people. So it felt like there's kind of a lot of stories going unrecognized and unrewarded. So that's kind of where the Mental Health Blog Awards started, in terms of just let's have a celebration. Yes, great, there are going to be some people that win awards, kind of need that for the event to happen, but actually it's more of a celebration of kind of the community or your community that you're part of. And I think this is our 5th year now. So we've had 2 online, 2 in person. So yeah, all of those conversations we've been having about like the benefits of online and the limitations are very much things that we have when we're talking about how to host in the future, and the accessibility that's gained from being online. But it really is an opportunity, like I say, to celebrate those different voices, to be informed and to start to educate ourselves on illnesses that we don't know about, we're not educated on, because they're not the ones that we've experienced, to hopefully kind of share some of those voices and experiences, and signpost to different, sometimes services, but more often kind of campaigns and projects that people are involved in. And having run for 4 years and having like 4 lots of different winners, there's a nice spread now of different blogs and different podcasts and vlogs that focus in on different types of people and different stories and experiences as well. So yeah, it's an awesome place for people to look to find kind of new stories to share or read through as well.
Yeah, I know for me personally, I've kind of gone to the Mental Health Blog Awards and looked for different things again to like find different stories, because it's almost now worked out we've got like an archive of all these different people which share like really good content. So it's a nice thing to go to find something, and then you often, like, I've gone on tangents where I've started with one person on the Mental Health Blog Awards and then ended up with a completely different person at the opposite end of the spectrum. But it's easier than just trying to find this random thing, because as someone who's tried to find people to talk about stuff for our social medias, it can be so tough to like find someone, especially when you're looking for something very specific, or you're looking for, say, bipolar day or something like that. Trying to find something that specific. So I think, you know, some stuff like the Mental Health Blog Awards is really helpful for finding those people and those stories for me as well.
Yeah, it's really tricky because, like you say, that I know there are some people that share almost like catalogs or registries of mental health bloggers or places that you can find content, and that can be really useful. But hopefully by having, let's say, I guess a shorter list in terms of people that have been supported or put forward, recognised kind of by their community, there's an element of kind of accreditation that goes with that sort of says like these people are kind of safe and supportive in the way that they speak about mental health blogging. And importantly, like our winners and our nominees, they don't have to be kind of exclusively mental health kind of bloggers or content people, it might be that their focus is on food or retail or lifestyle or something else, but within their content and within the material that they share, they do speak about mental health. And I think that's a big thing for us as well. It's not about kind of creating an exclusive network or close community. It's about celebrating and recognizing those conversations where they happen. Sometimes we're part of them, sometimes we're not. And that's a great kind of to hear that you use that as a bit of a resource as well, and a good example of where we're in a way facilitating those conversations, but also not part of them.
And where can people find Mental Health Blog Awards and podcasts if they need to?
So for Mental Health Blog Awards, I always feel like I get web addresses wrong. So I'm pretty sure it's mhblogawards.com. But if you search Mental Health Blog Awards, it should come up. We are kind of based in the UK, but there's international nominees. We have international supporters as well. So it's not just UK focused, although we do recognise that's where a lot of the support comes from. So there's information about the awards there.
Yeah, and obviously if there's anything wrong, I'll double check it and it'll be in the so I'll make sure that's all right. So thank you very much to Mike, of course, for joining, and Rob for regularly joining us, as always.
Okay.
And yeah, so if anyone, again, as we said at the top, if anyone is affected by anything that we spoke about today, please do reach out. There are so many services for Solent Mind services. Include if you're in Portsmouth, Fareham, Gosport, Havant or East Hampshire, you can contact the Harbour. Again, links will be on the end screen of this podcast. There'll be the number for the Harbour. If you're in the Southampton area, you can call a lighthouse. Again, same again. If you're in neither of them, give our support line a call. As we said, there's a web chat version as well, but they'll be able to refer you to any services that are available in your area, and just give little bite-sized advice and support as well. And again, there's so many services in Solent Mind, Aberdeen, Heath, Hand and Overmind if you are in Hampshire, and of course all the local minds. There's probably a local mind accessible to you in your area, so check that out. And if not, go to the National Mind website and there'll be resources for the whole of the country as well. So again, thank you very much to guests for joining. Thank you for listening. And the next episode of the podcast will be next month, and it'll be a Pride Month episode. So make sure you follow us and subscribe to make sure you do not miss that. Thank you very much, everyone.
If you have been affected by any problems discussed in today's episode, please reach out to our services. If you're in Portsmouth, Fareham, Gosport, Havant or East Hampshire, you can contact the Harbour, open 4:30pm to 11pm every single evening. Just text or call 0741 364 911. If you're in the Southampton area, contact the Lighthouse, open 4:30pm to 11pm every evening. Text Lighthouse and your postcode to 074 5127 6010. And if you aren't in either of those areas, please contact the Solent Mind support line. Give them a call on 023 8017 9049 or contact the web chat on our website. They are open 10am to 2pm on weekends and bank holidays, and 9am to 7pm any other day. And they'll be able to let you know any services available in your area.